Let's take a look at section 1.1 for geometry. This is naming geometric figures. Feel free to pause this video so you can write down the information. I'm not going to pause in the video. So pause the video on each screen to write it down, and then you can fill in your notes with the stuff that I talk about. So this first set of vocab here, we're going to learn about points, lines, and planes. These are going to be the basis for pretty much everything we talk about in geometry is going to be made up of versions of these things. So a point is just a location in space. It doesn't have dimension, meaning it doesn't have size. So it's not going to be, you're not going to be doing area or measuring it or anything like that. It's basically just you point something out, like there it is on a map, you just point at it, but it's not actually sizable. We label it with a capital letter. This is going to be really important. Okay, all points are capital letters, so do not label them with lowercase letters. And so a picture of a point just looks like a point M, and then we would just name this M with a capital M. A line is something that extends forever in two directions. So you'll see this, I mean, you know what a line looks like, but things you need to make sure of is when you draw a line, they need to have arrows on the ends. So you need to see arrows on the ends. Then the line is going to be made up of an infinite number of points. And so I just have 2 points labeled here. You could have multiple, like if we had point M on here as well. When we name the line, okay, or when you see it written out on a quiz or a test, or you're trying to write out what line you want me to look at, you pick any 2 points on this entire line, any 2 in any order, it doesn't matter, and you write them with capital letters because they're points. So you could choose J and K, you write those 2 down, and then you draw a picture above it. Okay, of a line, because we're talking about a line. So make sure you have a line with 2 arrows on the end. JK, or you could do KJ, MK, KM, any of those. What you cannot do is use all 3. So this is not good. Okay, that's unacceptable. Okay, so don't do that. And don't just use 1 letter or 1 point. You can actually use 1 letter as long as it is a lowercase italicized letter. Another way we can name this line is to say line F. So I'm going to delete this out of here, but you could call it line F as well. Okay, so line JK or line F. Again, italicized lowercase if you're naming it with 1 letter. A plane extends forever in all dimensions, and it is 2-dimensional, meaning it's almost like it has area. It doesn't, because it extends forever. It's like your floor or your ceiling, the walls. It's like a really big piece of paper. Like if your piece of paper just didn't ever stop. That's what a plane is. So for a plane, naming a plane, we use any 3 points that are not in a straight line. So you can't choose points that all are on a straight line. So G, E, and O, you see how they have little points next to them? We can use those. So this would be plane GEO. Or it will sometimes have a bold capital letter in the corner. Okay, so this one we can also name plane P. So 3 points that aren't all in a straight line, or a bold capital letter in the corner of the plane. So I talked about that the 3 points couldn't be in a straight line. When 3 points are in a straight line, when you can connect them all with 1 straight line, they're called collinear. So like this, where you can get a line straight through. And we don't actually have a name for these either. But you could also have non-collinear. Okay, so if they're not in a straight line, they're called non-collinear. And that's when it looks something like this, where you have to bend to touch all 3 with your pencil. If you can draw straight through it, collinear. So co meaning share, and then you see the word line in there. So co, like co-president, coexist, co-ed. co means share. So down here we have co-planar, which means share a plane. So this time it has to be 4 points. This is why you have a tripod. So if you're a photographer for a tripod, the reason being is that 3 points are always coplanar, meaning that if you set a tripod down on the ground, it's never going to be unstable because all 3 legs are going to touch the ground at the same time. Or if you're sitting in a chair with 4 legs, sometimes it's wobbly. Okay, so if you're in a wobbly chair, it's because all 4 of those points are not coplanar. They can't touch a plane at the same time. So when we draw a plane again, we draw it with like this little parallelogram looking thing. So all 4 of these points are on the plane. So if you look at let me make myself bigger here. So for a plane, like if we looked at like my computer here as a plane, you could have all the points drawn on this plane. So if they were non-coplanar, you'd have some on the plane and you'd have like some off. So my fist is off of the plane. So my fist is non-coplanar with this plane. It's not on the plane at the same time as the rest of them. So the way that we draw that, or the way that that looks, because you're looking at a 2-dimensional screen, like we're not in person 3-dimensional. So the way that they will draw that on a piece of paper with a line, it will look something like this. So you will have a line that's drawn here, and then it'll stop. And then you'll see that it'll be dotted all of a sudden. And then it'll be back to solid. This is how they show that the line has kind of broken through the plane. So this is like, it's as if it looks like this, if you see me down there. So the pen going through the plane and coming back out the other side. That's how it's going to look on a drawing. This right here is the point of intersection, like it broke through the piece of paper. A segment is just part of a line. So, you know, the line, like we talked about, has arrows on either end and it goes on forever, where a segment starts and stops. Okay, so it has a starting point, it has a stopping point, and you could measure it. So you could tell me how long this was with a ruler. So those are called endpoints. So C and R are called endpoints. And that's what you have to name this segment with. You have to use the endpoints, C and R, and you draw a segment. So no arrows on the top. You can say these backwards too. So it could be CR or it could be RC. Both of these are fine. But draw a picture above, capital letters, use the endpoints. You cannot name this AC. Okay, this whole segment right here, starting point, stopping point, use those. You cannot use 3 letters. Okay, so the 2 endpoints. For array is part of a line as well. Okay, but for array, it has 1 starting point or 1 end point called an initial point, and it has 1 side that goes on forever, has an arrow. So when you name array, you have to start with the starting point. You have to start with the point that doesn't have an arrow, and then you have to go towards that arrow. So pick any other point going towards the arrow. So you can say JS or JT, and then you draw an arrow above it with the end point next to J. J did not have an arrow, so it doesn't have an arrow when you write it out either. S was the direction of the arrow. Again, you have to start with J and then go towards the arrow. So JT is fine also. What is not fine is to do TJ and draw your arrow this way. You can't do that. Okay, so that's unacceptable. You also can't start with S because S is in the middle. Opposite rays are 2 rays that are put together. So you see this red and blue ray. They're put together. They share a common initial point. Okay, so they share this point in the middle, E. And then together they make a straight line. So if I were going to name these 2 rays, I have to start with the initial point. So E, M would be this ray. So start with E, go towards M, draw an arrow above it. The blue one starts at E also and goes towards W. So EW with an arrow above it. That's your opposite rays. Common initial point, forever makes a straight line, so goes in opposite directions and makes a straight line. So that is your vocab for section 1. I'm also going to make a video of examples dealing with this vocab as well.